What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our Big Ten football channel.
Is Nebraska the Big Ten's biggest disappointment? Yes, absolutely. Nebraska is the Big Ten's biggest disappointment in a conference of disappointments. So Nebraska would not be the runaway winner necessarily, although for me they are. You could point to Michigan. College football playoff aspirations, Big Ten championship aspirations, gone. They can still win out. They can still beat Ohio State. They can still land in a decent New Year's Six bowl and finish in the top 10. But in terms of a championship, Michigan has blown it. So there's disappointment there from comparing the expectations at a Michigan under a Jim Harbaugh, carrying more weight, more burden, more baggage, more negative narrative nationally than any program in the country. Michigan has not met the mark, even though they looked great the last time out against Notre Dame 45-14, even though they played well against Penn State in the second half. They've blown it. So I can understand the argument that Michigan, based on the expectations, is the Big Ten's biggest disappointment, but they still have a top 10 finish awaiting them if they can run the table or at least make it to the finish line at 10-3. Michigan State, coming off last season's 7-6 finish, in which they boasted arguably the best defense in the country, but their offense was decimated by injuries, but really had no excuse of being as bad as they were. Michigan State vowed, and a lot of Michigan State fans that I hear from vowed to be back as a Big Ten contender this year, and they certainly are not up to the challenge. They've been blasted by Ohio State. They've been blasted by Wisconsin, and they have lost a lot of meaningful games in the Big Ten, most recently losing to Penn State, scoring again a Michigan State-like here in 2018 and 19, a Michigan State-like 7 points at home against Penn State. So Michigan State is not the program that Mark D'Antonio built and that landed top 10 finishes between 2010 and 2015. This is not the same program at Michigan State. So they're a disappointment as well. Northwestern, fresh off a Big Ten championship game appearance, at one point in time, leading into that Big Ten title game against Ohio State, Northwestern had won 15 of 16 Big Ten games. Now, no one is ever going to consider Northwestern to be a major factor in the Big Ten in comparison to Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, and maybe a few others. But Northwestern's been very impressive under Pat Fitzgerald, who's basically built a program that we can count on going 8-4. And over the course of 4 seasons, won double-digit games 3 out of 4 years, and then culminated last year by beating Utah in a bowl game to finish in the top 15 to 20 in the nation. But Northwestern's still a cyclical program. They still need the right circumstances, the right schedule, the right roster, talent churn to get them to the right position to make a run. They don't reload. They can't muster it up each and every year to make a run at the Big Ten West. It's still a cyclical program. The cycle works in their favor more often than not. So Pat Fitzgerald has raised the level to that degree, but they are cycling down this year, and it is mighty ugly. They might have the worst offense in the Power 5. I think we would count Rutgers as being kind of its own category, that Northwestern has been just deplorable on offense and do not have dynamic playmakers. Hunter Johnson did not pull through for them, and they have had a rotating system at quarterback based on injuries and ineffective play. So Northwestern, a huge disappointment in the Big Ten as well, but not as big as Nebraska. One more to note, Wisconsin. Are they a disappointment? No, they're still top 15 in the country. Yes, based on the body of work start to finish, Wisconsin is about where most people expected them to be. But considering they came out of the gate and they looked like a legit college football playoff contender, they were smashing teams. Only gave up 4 touchdowns in the first 6 games on defense. Their defense scored 4 touchdowns and gave up 4 touchdowns. They had 4 shutouts under their belt after 6 games. They mauled Michigan, a game that was 35-0 in the third quarter. They mauled Michigan State 38-0. They looked dominant. Most people still believed Ohio State would beat them and be the better team, but thought Wisconsin is going to run the table, be strong, win the Big Ten West. They look like clearly the best team on that side of the Big Ten. Well, before they could hit Columbus, of course, they lost to Illinois. They got tripped up there. Now they're riding a 2-game losing streak. Now they have to face Iowa. So based on what we thought of Wisconsin football like just a couple weeks ago, it may not quite be the season that we expected at Wisconsin, and therefore a recent disappointment. But none of those, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, compare to Nebraska. Nebraska hired its favored son, Scott Frost, to resurrect the program. He took an 0-12 program at UCF and turned it into a national champion, at least a 13-0 football team that beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. We know what he accomplished at UCF. We know that a turnaround to elite status in the Big Ten was going to take time at Nebraska. But I and others thought that we would see more decided, substantial improvement at this point. Thought that Nebraska might win 8 games this year, go 8-4, challenge for the Big Ten Western Division, in which the Big Ten media selected them to win the division. There were prognosticators all over the place and analysts that selected the Huskers to win the Big Ten Western Division. They did not. They will not. They just went to Purdue last week and lost again in typical Nebraska fashion. They led 10-0 and dropped another road game and are now 1-8 under Scott Frost on the road. Earlier, they went to Boulder to take on a Colorado team that's really not that good. And they led 17-0, and blew that in an overtime loss. Nebraska concluded the 2018 season not necessarily rolling through the Big Ten win after win after win after win, but they went from losing all their games early 0-6 to winning 4 of 6, 4-2 down the stretch for Nebraska. And they started to beat teams like Minnesota by 25 points. They took Ohio State to the wire in Columbus. They took Iowa, a top 15 team. They took them to the final play of the game. So we expected Scott Frost, Adrian Martinez, a revamped defense, all those playmakers on offense, Maurice Washington, Dedrick Mills, Wan'Dale Robinson, J.D. Spielman, to put up big points at Nebraska and for them to at least be exciting and competitive in the Big Ten Western Division, and they have flopped. It doesn't look like they're going to make a bowl game based on the schedule that they're staring at right now, which includes Iowa and Wisconsin. Nebraska looks like they're going to miss postseason play again this season. So a Big Ten Western Division contender and championship pick by many is not even going to make a bowl game. So yes, is Nebraska the Big Ten's biggest disappointment in 2019? A resounding yes.